So this Sunday and Monday, we have a program which really depends on the virtuosity and musicianship of the players in a very particular way. We start with a string trio by Beethoven. String trios are one of the most complex and difficult things for a composer to attempt. And we can see this from history because there are very few of them. In fact, hardly any. There is one magnificent example from Mozart, a massive work, which is 50 minutes long. And there are a few more recent ones, 20th century, and in between, hardly anything. The reason for this is that we lack enough fingers to make a real chord. String quartet, if you imagine, has 4 people who can play at least 2 notes each, which gives us 8. But a trio is lacking the second violin, and this severely limits the actual number of notes at any given time that can be played. This also affects the texture of the piece, because if you imagine a space from the bottom of the sound to the top of the sound being divided amongst 4 people, and then imagine that same space being divided by 3. Totally different sound, much more open, much more space in between notes, and this is very problematic. Beethoven wrote these 3 string trios, opus 9, and then moved on to string quartets. Once he moved on to writing string quartets, he never wrote another trio. However, the 3 opus 9 trios are magnificent because he was so great at tackling specific problems and figuring them out. This number 2 in G major is a wonderful piece with all of the typical Beethoven characteristics. It has a great first movement, full of energy, but not anything other than pastoral. It's very calm, it's very beautiful, lyrical. Great slow movement, which is one of his, what I would call faster slow movements. It's not completely slow, but has the feeling and intensity of his lyrical slow movements. Wonderful minuet and scherzo, and a fantastic rondo to finish the piece. Next on the program, we have Bartók's second violin sonata. It seems that World War I was quite devastating to many composers, and many of them either completely changed their style. I'm thinking of Frank Bridge, for instance, or had a very difficult time staying in the mood to write music. Bartók faced exactly the same thing and actually pulled back on his composing quite a bit after World War I, but then wrote 2 magnificent violin and piano sonatas. Being a great concert pianist himself, actually making a living from that, Bartók knew the piano intimately, but also developed his own particular style and his own particular technique in playing the piano, which was different from anyone before him or after, for that matter. And the sound of his piano writing is very different from anything else you can hear. This particular sonata number 2 is one that I'm very, very fond of. It's an incredible work which generates a kind of mesmerizing, pulling you into it fascination from the very first note to the very last note. And in fact, let me talk about the very first note. The very first note of this piece is a low note in the piano, which is very loud and simply stands by itself and resonates until the violin comes in. Striking sound. The very last note of the piece is equally striking in a very different way. Bartók felt that all of his music from this period was tonal, and this particular piece he feels is in C major. I would venture to say that there are vast moments where that's hard to believe because of the sounds coming out. But the very last sound that we hear in this piece is indeed a C major triad. Two of the notes in the piano and one in the violin, spaced very far apart, but definitely a beautiful C major triad. In between this first note and the last note, we have two movements, which are played attacca, meaning no pause in between. The first is a little bit shorter, and the second movement is longer. The first, rather lyrical, and the second takes us into a kind of step-by-step escalation of drama and excitement, which reaches quite, I would call it frenzy at the end, before dying off slowly to that last soft chord. A lot of times in this piece, it seems as if the world of the piano and the world of the violin are living contemporaneously, but in totally different places. They seem to link up at certain spots, but then go off on their own in different textures and different ferocious music. This is one of the more intense and exciting pieces in that repertoire. After intermission, we have a lightning and a kind of elegant, wonderful, light-hearted, virtuosic finish to this program with the Clarinet Quintet by Carl Maria von Weber. Weber was not a clarinetist, he was a pianist, but he loved the clarinet, had a very good friend who was a great clarinetist, and ended up writing quite a bit of repertoire for the clarinet. There is a concerto, there are pieces with piano, and most famous of all is this quintet for string quartet and clarinet. Unlike Brahms or Mozart, where the ensemble altogether brings us the impact of the music, this is rather more like a concerto for clarinet with not an orchestra as accompaniment, but the string quartet. And certainly the string quartet in this piece is a subsidiary element, accompanying, backing up, and laying the backdrop and the background for what turns out to be one of the most virtuosic showpieces for the clarinet. This is a vehicle for a great clarinetist to exploit every aspect of what works on the clarinet, meaning very high register, low register, speedy fingers beyond imagination, and kind of a thrilling ride altogether.